Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, we got a great Thursday edition of the show for you today. We start out with a story of Biden. Yes, old creepy Uncle Joe Biden from his basement is leading in the polls. But the Democrats are still worried, and we'll explain why in just a moment. And then sanity has finally returned to some states, in this particular case, the state of Wisconsin. The Supreme Court in Wisconsin ruled that the stay-at-home order was unconstitutional, and therefore Wisconsin is essentially open immediately, and we'll get into the details of that. And then, as I've been telling you before many times, progressives, man, they cannot be reasoned with, they can't be dealt with, they can only be defeated. And this story tells you why, because progressives will always carry everything to the extreme. And we've been talking a lot about the all mail-in ballot, that type of thing. Now progressives are pushing for internet voting. And I knew this was coming, and we'll expand upon that. But we start with old Joe Biden. He's still locked in his basement. But he's up in the polls, but it may not be exactly what you think. This is from a New York Times article. Joe Biden has an edge on Trump in the polls, so why are Democrats worried? I wonder why they're worried. In his first weeks as the presumptive Democratic nominee, so he's still, first of all, the presumptive, he hasn't secured the nomination, Joseph R. Biden Jr. went days at a time with no public events. Well, how do you know when Joe Biden's had a public event? It's not like people are waiting in line to get there. His campaign, if you see people waiting in line at a Joe Biden event, it's probably at the portalet. His campaign staff in early April was about half the size of Hillary Clinton's at the same time in 2016. So Hillary's was bigger. I'm not surprised. A much touted virtual rally last week was riddled with glitches. I don't know if you saw any excerpts of that. To say it was riddled with glitches is, our Cracker Jack staff here, which we do have a staff of one, well, it's two. It's Billy Bob, and I don't talk much about him, but my young friend Gabe, who is just, on his way to becoming a crazy rich Asian. He keeps me on track here, but my staff between Billy Bob and Gabe does a heck of a lot better job than creepy old Uncle Joe's staff. But so if you hadn't seen that rally, he supposedly had a virtual one, man. I don't know. If you want some laughs, check it out. And Mr. Biden and his advisors remain stuck at home, uncertain if their Philadelphia headquarters will ever reopen. Now they're talking about why they're having problems. Joe Biden is their candidate. That's the biggest problem they got. You can only put so much lipstick on a pig, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, Joe Biden is still their candidate. And of course, we know the enthusiasm for Joe. We've shown you pictures. Now, this was before COVID-19, and this is a real picture of people waiting to see Joe Biden. If we could put that up, check it out. Less than 6 months before Election Day, Mr. Biden finds himself in an extraordinary position. Party leaders have quickly united around him, and he has an edge over President Trump in most polls. I find that interesting. You got to keep this in mind. Now, we know that polling has been a bit suspect over the last few years. The one thing before I show you a few numbers that shows you just how off the rails polling can be, I just want to say this about polling. If you look at polling on any given day, that's really not the best indicator of what's happening. You have to look at the trend lines in polls. And you can go to stuff like Real Clear Politics and get their average. But more important is to look at what the polls are doing over, say, a week at minimum to month and that kind of thing. And that'll give you a better indication of what's actually happening than any given snapshot, which can change from day to day. But they say that the polls give an edge to Joe Biden. But let me just give you a couple of examples of what that edge actually means. November 4th, 2016, just 4 days before the election, of Donald Trump where he defeated Hillary Clinton. This was an ABC News poll about the Electoral College and the likelihood of Hillary winning just 4 days prior to the actual election. So ABC News dug through states' voting history, demographic shifts, and head-to-head polling to develop these electoral ratings. ABC News puts Clinton 4 days now before the election at 274 electoral college votes and Trump at 188. Now, we know what happened 4 days later. That poll was shown to be totally invalid. But a Washington Examiner poll, just to show you, and Washington Examiner is pretty conservative, they conducted a poll just after the last debate between Hillary and Trump. And this is what their poll showed. Conducted the final presidential debate. The polls, the Democratic nominee, talking about Hillary Clinton, leads Trump among likely voters 51 to 37%, a significant lead over the Republican candidate. So that tells you right there just what this polling actually means. And keep in mind that although it's true that Biden is leading in national polls, which national polls really don't mean much because it's a state-by-state election, Donald Trump is not only leading in the latest polling in battleground states, but in the leads where Biden has a lead, and he had a lead briefly in the battleground states, his lead is a fraction of what Hillary Clinton's lead was all throughout the whole year in 2016. So Biden has never gotten to the level that Hillary Clinton did. And what happened to her? Well, she lost, as a matter of fact. Mr. Biden's inability to influence the political or policy debate about the coronavirus and the nation's economic collapse has worried some Democratic allies. So they're thinking, my God, you won pretty much hands down in the primary. We're going through a coronavirus pandemic. The economy is collapsing, and you're still barely leading, if at all, Donald Trump. So they're a little bit worried. Donors and former Obama administrations who want Mr. Biden, they want him to be more visible. Now, I'm not sure that's actually true. I started to play this video, but it was of really poor quality, so you just have to take my word. You can look it up. Does Donnie Deutsch, his name, ring a bell to you? If you don't know who Donnie Deutsch is, he's a commentator frequently on MSNBC and quite often on Morning Joe. He's on there just about every day. Well, he was being asked about Biden being stuck in the basement, not being able to come out a couple days ago. And his answer was classic. He said, and now this is a guy who hates Trump. Keep in mind, this guy is way beyond a never Trumper. He literally loathes the man. And he is 100% for whoever the Democrat is. But he said that the less we see of Joe Biden, the better. And this coming from a hardcore progressive Democrat. So that tells you a lot right there. But talking about Mr. Biden, it says he rarely goes on offense against Mr. Trump in ways that have lasting impact. I don't know that he can have a lasting impact. Joe has a hard time completing 2 or 3 sentences in a row, let alone anything lasting. And his tentative handling of the biggest test recently, responding to sexual assault allegation by Tara Reade, that's the lady that was a staff member for then Senator Biden, and supposedly, according to her, he pushed her up against the wall and literally grabbed her by the what. So and so they say that here that Biden has not responded to that adequately enough. Now, these are Democrats saying this. And it says that assault allegation by Tara Reade prompted skepticism among some progressives and others about his instincts and his team's agility. Well, when you think about Joe Biden, I think the last word you would come with would be agility. I mean, I want to put a warning to all of you out there. If Joe Biden does what a lot of failed politicians ultimately do and go on Dancing with the Stars, if you're in the studio audience or you're one of the judges, please wear a face shield, some cover, because if Biden gets spun around, something's going to fly off. And I'm just trying to help. I'm always trying to help. But I like how they say in this, talking about Biden's tentative handling of his biggest test recently, responding to the. First of all, Biden, I think, is suffering from dementia. And I don't say that with any relish whatsoever. And also, you know, why would he get out and say that, admit all of this if it's true? He's going to play it close to the vest. So I understand Biden's tentativeness. I can make an excuse for it to a certain extent. But what excuse does the mainstream media and the progressive leftists, which are basically one and the same, what is their excuse for not covering this? They would have been happy to have this story of Tara Reade's allegations against Biden never come up, let alone buried underneath a pyramid of sand. I mean, they would have loved to have had that. It wasn't until things like John Martin Talks, for instance, and other conservative outlets that actually pushed this story to the forefront that it even was on the, I started to say on their radar screen, which would have been a misstatement, because they've known, the mainstream media and progressives have known about this Tara Reade allegation against Biden for a long time. They have just hoped it would go away. So if tentative handling, Biden, I'll give him a little bit of a pass on that. But the mainstream media and progressive leftists who were one and the same, I mean, they should be brought to task for this. Biden will get his due eventually. The circumstances could hardly be more challenging for Mr. Biden. He lacks Mr. Trump's bully pulpit. In other words, his house that he's hunkered down in ain't quite the same as old President Trump's house. And the coronavirus crisis has eliminated the kind of intimate retail politicking at which he excels. I don't know. Does Joe Biden really excel at retail politicking? Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that until South Carolina in the 2020 primary season, Joe Biden had run for president 3 times, really like 3.5 times, and had never, I repeat, never won a caucus or primary. I don't even think he'd even come second in any of them. So this idea that Joe Biden is somehow this great hands-on politician, I mean, how hard is it to win once you're an incumbent anywhere? But certainly he had the state of Delaware totally sewed up, and I'm not knocking them especially. It's difficult to beat an incumbent, but Joe Biden has never, I mean, this idea that he's been great on the campaign trail, I mean, really? He was dead in the water going to South Carolina. So Joe Biden has always been a lousy presidential candidate, period. There's just no interview of that. But interviews with more than 24 donors, talking about for Biden, advisors, activists, and party strategists portray an operation, talking about the Biden campaign, that is exhibiting some of the same difficulties that proved troublesome in the primary. Now, keep in mind, this article is in the New York Times, of all places. And I talked about this, I believe, yesterday on our show. And by the way, if you want to check out our podcast, the easiest way to do that is go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. You can go to our YouTube channel. You got to spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. Please subscribe and give us some views on there. We really appreciate it. You can watch us on America's Voice News Network. We're rebroadcast on that nightly. You can download a free app. We're also on their Facebook page live right now. Good morning. How are you? Howdy. But you can download Android, iPhone app, the Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV streaming, Pluto channel. And yes, we are now going universal because we are on Dish Network channel 219. So check that out. But what I talked about with Biden is that the New York Times is printing this article today. Yesterday, we talked about the New York Times on Sunday printed an op-ed piece, but with David Axelrod and this Palouf fella, 2 of the main guys behind Obama's, both his successful campaigns. And they did an op-ed piece in the New York Times basically blasting Biden for how he's campaigning to this point. And I say that to say this. When the New York Times publishes these types of negative pieces to a certain extent, on the main candidate, the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party, what that tells me is they don't think he can win, and they might I say, you be possibly setting it up to replace him at the last moment. I don't think that's actually going to happen. Could it happen? Yes, but I don't really think it's going to happen, in my opinion. But it could. It's certainly a possibility. But it says here, But interviews with more than 24 donors, advisors, activists, and party strategists portray an operation that is exhibiting some of the same difficulties that proved troublesome in the primary. Did I mention to you that Joe Biden is their candidate? It's not like all of a sudden Joe Biden has become this great candidate. He's always been a lousy candidate. And that's one reason I call him old bloated Joe, is because the only reason they all got behind Joe after South Carolina, after, old Clyburn threw him a life preserver in South Carolina, is that he floated by, and Trump derangement syndrome is so deep that they grab, people are drowning in it. They grab anything. When you're drowning, you'll grab whatever floats by. And old Joe floated by. This campaign, and I'll say this time and time again, is not about Joe Biden. If it's about Joe Biden, they can't win. It's about Trump derangement syndrome and ultimately how the American people view President Trump. That's all it is. It really doesn't matter who the Democrat is at this point. I don't really care who it is. I hope it stays Joe Biden myself. Said Lee D. Daugherty, a prominent Democratic strategist who ran the party, Democratic Party's 2008 and 2016 convention. That's pretty impressive. This is what they said, whatever hard hits you took in the primary, talking about Joe, does not even compare to what's coming from the White House and this president. There is no doubt. Joe, you hadn't seen nothing yet, but you will. And they went on to say, we've just got to be ready for the new tactics and to not rely on anything we've done in the past as the gospel truth of the campaign. First of all, what hard hits did Biden actually take in the primary? I mean, the only one I can remember is the one that Kamala Harris gave him about busing and all that. And did that really have any real life? It gave her a spike momentarily. And then when people saw a lot of her, they realized that other than her antics on the couch, there ain't much to her. But, Willie, has she found her Willie yet, by the way, Kamala Harris? Maybe old Smoking Joe will be her new Willie. I don't know. But I don't think Biden has been tested at all to this point. It's coming. You know good and well they're going to try to find a way to do away with the debates if Biden is the candidate, and we can't let that happen. I don't think it will happen, but they will definitely. If they had a choice between debates and no debates, which way do you think they'd go? Many Biden allies are eager to see the former vice president engage in social distance public events. What exactly would that look like? But his team is keenly sensitive to the health risks. I mean, Joe Biden is the very picture of, what are the term, comorbidity, morbidity. I mean, he is like the poster child for that. I'm not wishing it on him, just telling you the facts. To the health risks, including those for the 77-year-old Mr. Biden himself, and the need for Mr. Biden to model the respect for scientists and doctors that he urges Mr. Trump has flouted. So Biden is going to listen to Mr. Trump. A point Mr. Biden made on ABC News Good Morning America on Tuesday. So they're saying that they want Biden to actually do some social distancing rallies. Well, we got this meme that Eric Trump, I think, put up there. I have to agree with it. I don't think Biden would have an issue with social distancing, especially if it was just him. Now, maybe if he brought Beyonce and Jay-Z along like Hillary Clinton did, maybe he'd have a shot at a social distancing problem. But a Biden rally, they're automatically social distant. There is no doubt about that. But there is we got a breaking news here, major announcement that ought to really, really impact Biden's chances of winning one way or another. Have you heard this? On Tuesday, Mr. Biden announced that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would join a committee on climate change policy in coordination with Senator Bernie Sanders. So the Burn Man and AOC are coming full bore on board, man. In fact, when I think we have a video, Billy Bob, too. If you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass, he doesn't say much, but he coordinates all the videos. He's got a Twitter handle, by the way. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. And we've started being a little more active on there, so check us out, give us a follow, and we'll expand on that. But Billy Bob tells me that once Biden announced that Ocasio-Cortez was officially part of the campaign, she was, partying like it was 1999. Check this out. Oh, yeah, baby. Woo. Man, AOC, man, she ain't hard to look at. I will say that. Is that sexist? It's just true, man. I'm just a good old boy. But I can tell you, man, look at all that hair she's got flaunting around there. I mean, it dolled up real nice on the end there, but she was flaunting that, flashing that hair around. Joe Biden, man, that might be just the thing he needs, to get a good sniff of that, man. It might jumpstart old Joe and get him out there on the trail. We'll see. I mean, he might not be able to stay in the basement there. He'd give him a lot of sniff or something to think about, right? Ocasio-Cortez to the rescue. The Twitter twats, as I call them, are now fully on board. That's what they call the squad. I call them the Twitter twats. I think it's a better description, but they're fully on board with Joe, and they're going to drag that boy out of the basement. Think about it. Ocasio-Cortez lifted Bernie Sanders out of a heart attack in the hospital. So maybe she can get old Joe. I mean, his eyes, though, are about to pop out of his head anyway, so be careful. Be cool on the old dude, AOC. Andrew Bates, a campaign spokesman for Biden, said in a statement that Mr. Biden had won the Democratic primary. Yeah, he floated in it, by running a race that was true to Joe Biden's values. What exactly are Joe Biden's values? I mean, he enjoys a good hairdo. We know that. And he probably likes to give a good back rub. I don't know. He loves to apparently swim naked in front of a Secret Service agent. That's probably one of the reasons why he's running for president, so he can, do that. Maybe he'll bowl naked. That would be kind of interesting, I suppose. But I'm not sure what his values are. But let me get the quote right again. Andrew Bates, campaign spokesman, went on to say, "We," talking about the Biden campaign, "did this all with the foot of the incumbent impeached president on our backs." I think he was acquitted. And he added, dismissing the concerns of pundits that are being critical of Mr. Biden, "That's why Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee, and that's why we're going to beat Donald Trump in the fall." Well, Mr. Bates, you could be right. But don't give up your day job or your night job of running that little old hotel you got, the Bates Motel. Don't give that up just yet, because it may be a bit tougher to beat Mr. Trump than you think. But let me just reemphasize this, and I'm going to tell you this right up till Joe Biden drops out or gets beat. This campaign is not about Joe Biden. It can't be. And they know this. The Democrats know this. They're not dummies. They may be out there. They're communists and everything else, but they're not stupid. They know that this is not about Joe Biden. They cannot win if it's about Joe Biden, period. And the polling is really showing that. It's basically a flat line, kind of like Joe Biden is. This is about Donald Trump. His base, if it stays solid, there's every indication that it will be. In fact, I see more people more determined than ever to vote for Mr. Trump. But it's about how the American people view the presidency of Donald Trump, and whether or not, since he made America great again in the start, can he do it double? Can he do it twice over? That's what it's really about. And talking about polling, this is just an FYI thing. I don't know if you saw this or not. You probably didn't, but CNN just did a poll, and President Trump scored the highest in the poll of any CNN poll they have ever, I repeat, ever done. If you hadn't heard about it, that's why, because it's the best he's ever done. You can find it on their website, I think, by digging down in it. But Mr. Trump scored better on a CNN poll than he ever has in history, and all you hear is crickets about that. But here's the best. Here's my ultimate say on this. No matter what the polls show, up or down, any of that stuff, we, the supporters of President Donald Trump, and I consider me and Billy Bob some of his strongest supporters, I'm telling you, take nothing for granted. Please take nothing for granted. we've got to do, and I'm going to keep saying this, we've got to do like my old daddy used to say, you got to campaign for President Trump like he's 2 votes behind, and the next 2 people you see are the 2 that are going to put him over the top. President Trump's going to do his part. I have no doubt. We got to do ours. We cannot take anything for granted because they are going to try to hook, crook, and steal this election, and we're going to talk about a story about that in just a moment. All right, let's move along to a Breitbart article. Love the guys at Breitbart. Want to give them somewhat of a shout out there. But Wisconsin Supreme Court strikes down governor's stay-at-home order. Some sanity in Wisconsin. In a 4-3 decision, pretty narrow, about as narrow as it gets, right? In a 4-3 decision, Wisconsin Supreme Court struck down the Governor Tony Evers' administration's stay-at-home order. Now, good news out of Wisconsin and an update on what we talked about yesterday. They had a special election in Wisconsin for a congressional seat that was held by a Republican before, but the Republican not only won, but won by a landslide. And we can formally announce now that disputed seat in California, a Republican captured it and took it back from the Democratic Party. And we told you yesterday that they were still counting absentee ballots, but the Democratic challenger late last night officially conceded the race. So the 2 special elections that happened on Tuesday, the Republicans won one in Wisconsin overwhelmingly and captured a Democratic seat in California. But you won't hear much about that either, like that CNN poll, because guess what? It just don't fit the narrative. What do you think people, the CNN would be talking about today if the poll showed Biden scoring super high and the Democrats winning those House seats? What do you think they'd be talking about today? I think you know. The ruling essentially, talking about the ruling in Wisconsin to open up the state, the ruling essentially reopens the state, lifting caps on the size of gatherings, allowing people to travel as they please, and allowing shuttered businesses to reopen, including bars and restaurants. So basically, it acts like the shutdown order never happened. So it's returned to normal. Now, I don't expect Wisconsin to just bum rush return to normal. That's not going to happen. Now, there could be incidences of individuals acting a fool. There always is. But I actually trust capitalism a whole lot more, apparently, than the Democrats, because they seem to hate capitalism, the thing that's produced more wealth and more lifestyle improvements and health and everything else than any other economic system in the history of the world, let alone this nation. I mean, that's just a fact. But I trust capitalism, and by that I mean that I don't think restaurants can afford to just, even though they may be allowed to by law, just reopen like nothing ever happened, because I don't think the public will frequent those places. I honestly believe that restaurants that practice, whether you agree with the social distancing and all that or not, but restaurants that actually practice that, even if they're not required to, will actually do better in the economy as it reopens. And I trust capitalism. Health Secretary Andrea Palmer, this is of Wisconsin, had issued the order, the shutdown order, and the court found that she didn't have authority to do so. Now, the reason why this was challenged is because there was like a several-month extension to it recently, and that's when people said enough is enough. But it says here that the court found she didn't have the authority to do so. So they're saying that an unelected bureaucrat doesn't have the authority to shut your business down like this, just arbitrarily so. And my question, and I agree with that, by the way, but my real question has been, who does have the authority to do that? I would maintain that President Trump doesn't even have the authority to do that. I think it's unconstitutional absent some kind of, what do they call it, martial law. I don't see where any, from the White House to the outhouse, in between, why any elected official without some kind of vote of the legislature and the people has the authority to shut us down. That is not to say that we shouldn't be practicing some of these things, but to mandate that your business is non-essential and must therefore shut down, I don't see that in the Constitution anywhere. If you do, please tell me. Chime in on whatever Facebook site you're watching and tell me, and you can chime in on anything. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. We're literally getting hundreds of comments across our Facebook network, and we really appreciate it. I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Rulemaking exists precisely. This is back to what this person, Health Andrea Palm, said. Rulemaking, no, I'm sorry. Let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is from Chief Justice Patience Rognasak wrote in the majority opinion. Now, I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, but I like what the judge said. Rulemaking exists precisely to ensure that kind of controlling, subjective judgment asserted by one unelected official, and I would say even elected official, but it says Palm is not imposed in Wisconsin. And I'm just going to say what the congregations say. Amen. Hallelujah. I've been waiting for someone in authority to question the constitutionality of all of this, because I'm telling you, we are living, and this pandemic has just exposed it, we're living in a post-constitutional age. It's not too late to turn it back, and we did some of that with the election of Donald Trump, and we certainly can try to complete it in going back to the Constitution with the re-election of Donald Trump. Anything less than that, and I don't have much hope for our U.S. Constitution. It's shaky at best. Former Governor Scott Walker praised the court's decision when he said the Wisconsin Supreme Court upheld the law. Amen. I guess he was actually thinking about the Bill of Rights as opposed to the governor of New Jersey. The rule of law, this is back to what former Governor Walker said, the rule of law must be upheld even in emergencies. I am honored to have appointed two of the justices in the majority on the 4-3 decision. Right there, ladies and gentlemen, let's just quote something that President Obama said, and he's absolutely right. Elections have consequences. If the recall and everything, all the hell that Walker went through, if he had not prevailed, then there's a very good chance that Wisconsin would still be on lockdown and in much, much worse shape than they are. So elections absolutely have consequences. Now, let me just say something very quick about Walker. I really liked Walker. I still do. As a matter of fact, when he was talking about running for president and first announced, I was considering supporting him. He was one of the early people. I liked him, but I hate to say it. And just one thing about me, I'm not politically correct. If you're just new to our show, you may not really. If you're looking for political correctness, you're in the wrong spot. I just tell it like it is across the board. Walker was simply not ready for national prime time. He just wasn't. And he may come back again. I doubt it very seriously at a presidential level. But I respect Mr. Walker. And man, who fought harder for conservative principles against overwhelming force, outside forces in Wisconsin that tried to defeat this guy? So I give him a ton of credit. Right down the line. But he just wasn't ready for prime time on a national level presidential campaign. Back to the article. The decision allows schools to remain closed. And see, here's the thing. Why are schools allowed? I mean, I'm not saying it's unconstitutional. Let me get this straight. Schools can be closed. I may disagree with it, but it's not a constitutional issue because that is a government program. Essentially, public schools are government programs. Like them, hate them, whatever. I'm not even getting into that right now. But I don't have a problem with the authority part of it. Now, the actual implementation I may have some issue with, but the authority to close the schools down is absolutely given to local governments. If you don't like it, vote the rascals out. People are always asking me, I think I'm going to run for office, and they always want to start with Congress or at the very least the state legislature. I tell people all the time, please run for school board. If you want to make an impact on your community literally overnight, take over your local school board. That would do it, because that's the one place that conservatives have had a real hard time getting a foothold in many, even in conservative areas. And the schools are literally the future of our country. So I implore people to run for school board. But the decision allows schools to remain closed, and local governments can create their own restrictions, according to this ruling. That I don't understand. What's the difference between a state government and a local government? Now, I realize it's closer to the people, but I would maintain that and I told you, I don't think the White House really has constitutional authority to shut the economy down. I certainly don't believe that your local mayor has that authority. So I don't understand that part of the ruling. I'm just telling you like it is. Dane County, home of liberal Madison, I get that being outside of Gainesville, Florida here, Dane County, home of liberal Madison, was quick to do just that. Imagine that. The progressives doubled down. It's like right here in our local area. I always tell you, I don't talk about local politics that much unless I think it impacts the same thing where you're having. Our local county commission, we went for 2 months on this shutdown with the state of Florida, and we were not required, it may have been suggested, but not required to wear masks. The minute that Governor DeSantis started partially opening up the economy, our local dominated total progressive county commission all of a sudden decided it was the right time to make people wear masks, even though they haven't been for 2 months. So, I'm not surprised at these rulings. But Public Health Officer Janelle Henrick took Evers' orders limiting gatherings and enacted them at the local level. Evers said today, Republican legislators convinced 4 members of the state Supreme Court to throw the state into chaos. Think about that, chaos. So opening the economy so that you can go to work and, what is it in Texas, selfishly feed your children, somehow that's going to throw the state into chaos. What's going to throw the state into chaos is for the bread lines to get 10 miles long instead of 2 miles long. That's chaos, but opening the economy is chaos. That gives you an indication that the Democrats, like Rush Limbaugh said the other day, and I give him full credit, they're going to fight the reopening of the economy like you've never seen any fight before, because they believe that a shattered economy is the only way they can beat Donald Trump. They don't care about the American people. They care about winning. That's it. But they have provided, this is what this Evers said, they have provided no plan. There's no question among anybody that people are going to get sick. Republicans own that chaos. Man. So here, listen to this. People are going to get sick. We're going to have this. People have been getting sick since God created us, right? We're going to have this virus is going to be with us for maybe forever, but certainly for weeks, months, and years and decades. I'm hoping for a virus. I'm not holding out much hope for it, though. But yeah, and as I've been telling you, you're going to have to assess your own risk. I mean, there's a meme I put up on my Facebook site. I want to post it now. I call it the fear meme. I mean, we can't live like this meme says. And this is what the Democrats want you to do, because they believe that if you live like this meme, that you might have the courage to vote for Joe Biden or the insanity. It's never been safe to leave the cave. I hate to break that to you snowflakes and melting. If I melt, you deserve to be melting. It's never, ever been safe to leave the cave. That hasn't changed even today. Democrats, as I say, they're going to fight this across the nation. They put the power they're trying to put. And think about the Democrats, man. Back during the 2020 campaign, when they had 20 of them up there on the stage, they literally were saying they were for an open border and a welfare state, decriminalize, let everybody come in, give everything free to illegal immigrants, the stuff they weren't even giving free to you. And that just tells you, ladies and gentlemen, all they care about is winning. They don't care about the American people. They don't. It's just plain. I don't say that again with any relish, because we need a good, strong two-party system. We don't have one now. We have a party of insanity and trash America, and we have a party that gives you at least a fighting chance to save the Constitution. It's kind of really the way I see it. But Trump derangement syndrome is real. That's what this is really about. Think about that statement that public health official said, that to open the economy in Wisconsin is to invite chaos. That shows you. So you going back to work is chaos. That shows you just how deep Trump derangement syndrome is. And if you think it could only get worse, it will if this next story comes true. Experts sound alarms about security as states eye online voting. This is from The Hill. Experts are sounding alarms about potential security risks as several states consider allowing online voting amid COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I've been warning you a lot about the mail-in vote. And let me just say quickly, there's a huge difference between absentee, because they're trying to confuse you on this, absentee voting and a straight mail-in voting. Straight mail-in, absentee, let me back up. Absentee voting is a procedure for you. You have to, bottom line, you have to request the ballot yourself, and you have to be a registered voter. Every state has slightly different rules, but essentially they're the same in the sense that you, the voter, has to take personal responsibility and request a ballot. The mail-in vote they're talking about is a blanket, send out a ballot to every registered voter, whether they're live, dead, or whatever, no check or balance, and self-addressed stamp envelope, simply mail it back in. Do you think there might be a slight case for fraud? If you think that is dangerous, man, I haven't really even talked about internet voting, because internet voting without saying is just insane. But progressives, man, they will double down. I have a statement I make from time to time, but if I say it bears repeating. Progressives, ladies and gentlemen, they can never be reasoned with. They can never be dealt with, whether it's Congress all the way down to your city commissions and school board. They can never, ever, you can't deal with them. There's only one thing you can do with progressives, and that is defeat them at the ballot box. That's the only solution. Trust me, they will double down, and they never, ever quit. Delaware, New Jersey, and West Virginia are planning to allow overseas military personnel and voters with disabilities to return their ballots electronically for elections this year amid concerns about voting during a pandemic. Now, I'm a little surprised about West Virginia. The rest of those I'm not. But understand this. They're putting out this idea of veterans and people with disabilities. Don't trust that for a second. If that was all it was, I might not have an issue with it. But this is just to get you used to saying, well, we've already agreed to this. Now, this is how they do it. Progressives do it. We've already agreed to, banning assault weapons. So now let's get you handguns. I mean, that's kind of what this is about. If you agree to part of it, sounds reasonable, maybe, then they're going to go for hook, line, and sinker, the whole thing. But I'm surprised a little bit about West Virginia, said not the others. And here, and this is kind of a joke, but at the same time, it's probably true. One of my goals, of course, is to be seriously entertaining. But I worry about voters with disabilities. And I'm not worried about them getting access to the polls, but I'm worried if internet voting is made to look like it's for helping people with disabilities, all of a sudden, especially Democrats, there'll be a whole lot more disabled people. I mean, the amount of and I'm not wanting people to be disabled, but I guarantee you, if they open this window of internet voting, quote, for disabled, the numbers of disabled people, just like the cancer patients have gone away during the pandemic here, the number of people with disability will skyrocket if this actually happens. But federal officials and cybersecurity experts are strongly urging states, and John Martin Talks is as well, to stay away from online voting, arguing that it could open up new avenues for interference less than 4 years after Russia meddled in 2016 elections. And that's a great point. Weren't the people that are pushing for internet voting, didn't they tell us that basically Hillary Clinton was robbed by Russian bots on the internet? I mean, isn't that basically what we've been told we have to believe? Well, we're about to run out of time on this, but I want to read this last paragraph and then we'll quit. It says here about these guidelines, the electronic ballot return. These are the guidelines they're trying to say, and some of the security people have an opinion on this. Electronic ballot return, the digital return of voted ballot by the voter creates significant security risk to voted ballot integrity, voter privacy, ballot secrecy, and system availability. The agencies wrote in the guidelines, securing the return of voted ballots via the internet while maintaining voter privacy is difficult, if not impossible, at this time. Can anybody actually say that that's not true? I mean, really, if this happens, it could be over for our republic, let alone President Donald Trump. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.